Black Friday has started on Boosty. Up to 60% discount on subscription levels. Hurry up to buy at such a great price. You can watch exclusive videos of Naruto Lemon. Link in the description. Enjoy watching everyone. Description: for invention techniques, Edo Tensei Shinigami decided punish Tobirama Senju. However, his older brother, Hashirama, took all the blame and punishment on himself. Now he must return to the world of the living and take care of the Uzumaki Naruto, who is his grandniece. How will the girl's life turn out if she is raised by the first Hokage? And then Mokutan awakened. Chapter 29: Genius and Demon. Shikamaru Nara vs. Sabaka no Temari, the examiner repeated once again, highlighting the name of the genin from Konoha. Shikamaru, with an indifferent expression on his face, yawned and remained in place, looking at the arena. Uzumaki frowned. This laziness will one day destroy Nara. She should help him. With such thoughts, the girl pushed the boy into the arena, looking with some malice at how he angrily drilled her with his gaze. Shikamaru got up from the sand and shook himself. Throwing his hands behind his head, he walked with wide strides towards Temari, who angrily looked at him. What kind of antics are these? Let's start the fight. With these words, Genma jumped to the side. Sabaka no immediately took out her fan. And Shikamaru only yawned lazily. Are you ready to give up already? The girl's mocking voice rang out. Actually, I don't really care whether I'll ever become a Chunin or not. I was too lazy to take this exam from the very beginning, but they made me. He looked ahead sullenly. Well, then hold on. Temari barked and ran at Neru. The dog swung her fan, but the boy managed to dodge and hide behind the trunk of a tree growing right in the arena. Having looked out from his hiding place a little, Shikamaru folded several seals and his shadow lengthened, catching up with his opponent. The kunoichi began to jump back, standing under the scorching sun, so as not to get caught. When the brunette's shadow froze in place, no longer able to move even a millimeter, the blonde grinned and drew a line with her fan, beyond which she should not step. The shadow returned to its original form, and Nara wiped the sweat from his forehead. The dog swung its huge fan. The boy did not have time to dodge, and as a result, several wounds appeared on him. Ignoring the dripping blood, he hid behind the tree trunk again and took off his jacket. Having attached a fishing line to it, he put this construction aside. Nara wrapped the other end of the fishing line well on a tree branch, so that the jacket would not fly away later. And then the boy launched this parachute into the air and lengthened his shadow. As soon as Temari tried to launch the technique at Shikamaru again, she suddenly froze in place, unable to move. What? Temari was perplexed. How? I lengthened my shadow with the help of the shadow from the jacket. The dark-haired man nodded at the construction flying in the air. Nara stood up and began to approach Sabaka no, and she, bound by shadows, also went to meet him, looking at all his actions with some apprehension and fear. The boy stood next to Genma and raised his hand up. I give up. He yawned. What? Sabaka no's eyes widened in surprise. I've thought through the next 200 moves, but I only have enough chakra to hold you for at least 10 seconds, Nara explained. So I give up. Winner, Sabaka no Temari, the Jonin announced. The stands applauded. Temari glared at the genin, burning a hole in him with her gaze. Just think. She was disgraced in front of everyone. Nara only smiled faintly and cancelled his technique. And then he walked towards the stands with wide strides. Next fight, Uchiha. Sasuke vs. Sabaka no Gaara, Genma said. Gaara came down and stood next to the Jonin. The Uchiha was gone. Silence and tension hung in the air. After talking with the Hokage, the examiner gave Sasuke 10 minutes. However, he still did not appear and did not appear. So, the time is fin, Shiranu wanted to say, but he was distracted by a puff of white smoke in the center of the arena. Are we late? Kakashi asked calmly. No, you are just in time, the examiner answered. Uchiha Sasuke vs. Sabaka no Gaara. Let the fight begin, the examiner said and ran to the side. Sasuke jumped back from his opponent a few meters and threw a kunai at him. Gaara didn't even move. The sand blocked the weapon's path and turned into a sand copy of Sabaka no, which smiled bloodthirstily. The clone began to attack the Uchiha, controlling the sand with his hands. The Sharingan carrier dodged and appeared right in front of the red-haired man, striking him in the neck. However, Sasuke's hand got stuck in the sand. Gritting his teeth, the boy hit the sand clone in the face with his other hand, thereby freeing his limb. Sand scattered on the ground. Without losing his combat advantage, the Uchiha rushed at the real Gaara and was about to hit him, but a new portion of sand blocked his path. Grinning, the Uchiha moved behind his opponent, sending him flying with a powerful blow. Landing on his feet, Sabaka looked at Sasuke with hatred and some surprise, who, having reduced the distance between them, again found himself behind the Kazekage's son. However, Gaara was already prepared for such a turn of events, so the sand surrounded its owner in a dense whirlwind, not allowing the Uchiha to pass. Naruto thoughtfully bit her lip, standing in the stands. Sasuke developed enormous speed in a month. Of course, the Uchiha was not as fast as Lee, but his movements were amazing. Kakashi said that Sasuke copied Rock's actions with his Sharingan when they fought before the first stage, and then remade them for his own fighting style. Looking closely at Sasuke, the girl was convinced that Kakashi was a good teacher. True, he likes to be late and lazy, but the essence remained the same. Hatake was able to teach the Uchiha Chidori in a month or so. No, of course, teammate Uzumaki and Haruno spent a lot of time and chakra creating this technique, but it was quite powerful, since it was able to break the cocoon in which Gaara hid. Suddenly, Sabaka no, seeing his blood and feeling pain in his shoulder, screamed. Sasuke looked at his opponent in confusion, who, taking advantage of the Uchiha's hesitation, grabbed his hand with sand and squeezed it. Somehow tearing his hand from captivity, the boy jumped away from the enemy and looked dumbfoundedly into the hole in the cocoon, which began to crumble, falling to the ground. Suddenly, white feathers began to fall from the sky, slowly circling in the air. The spectators began to yawn and fall asleep. Naruto, feeling sleepy, stopped the flow of chakra in her body and abruptly resumed it. The genjutsu immediately wore off. Having examined the arena, the girl frowned. The shinobi from Konoha were fighting the shinobi from Sound and Sand. Almost all the spectators were asleep. The Kage's bed exploded and a purple barrier formed there, not letting anyone through. Temari and Kankuro jumped up and, grabbing the almost unconscious Gaara, whose right side of his face began to change, rushed away from the arena. Sasuke rushed after them. Powerful explosions and screams were heard all around. Suddenly, all this was interrupted by a loud bang. Turning her head to the side, Uzumaki saw 3 huge snakes that were destroying the village. Summoning technique. Naruto, jumping out into the middle of the arena, summoned a huge toad. "What's the matter?" Gamahiro asked, looking around. Konoha was attacked, Naruto quickly explained. "Can you deal with those snakes?" "Easy." The toad nodded and galloped off towards the enemy. Suddenly, another clap was heard and Gamaken appeared. Naruto smiled. So, Jiraiya was here too. But there was no time to think about it. The girl rushed to Hatake and Guy, who were fighting several opponents at once. "What's going on?" Mato asked. Gaara began to transform into Shikaku. Temari and Kankuro carried him away. Sasuke followed them, Uzumaki answered, helping her friends. The girl had long ago told them that Gaara Jinchuriki. "This is bad." Kakashi shook his head. "Sakura," he called the pink-haired girl, repelling another enemy attack. "I taught you the sleeping technique, didn't I? You were good at it. Wake up Shikamaru by neutralizing this technique, and go after Sasuke together. You will have to complete one mission." "What mission?" Haruno was surprised. "This is an A-rank mission." Hatake cut his finger with a kunai and made several seals. Summoning technique. A dog appeared in a cloud of smoke. He will find Sasuke's trail. "Hello, Pakin," Naruto waved her hand, sending Sunovets flying with her foot. "A puppy?" Sakura asked in bewilderment, to which the dog approached her. Hey girl, don't you dare call me a cute puppy. Haruno stared at the talking dog in surprise. Taking a deep breath, the girl gathered all her will into a fist, so as not to do something stupid, because a talking dog is something that goes beyond the norm. Sakura found the lazy genius with her eyes. He was sleeping on one of the chairs. Just as she was about to touch him, the boy opened his eyes and stared boredly at the confused Kunoichi. Shikamaru? She called uncertainly. I'm not going anywhere. I don't care about Sasuke. Nara yawned. You'll go and that's it, Naruto barked, launching another shinobi at him. Shikamaru dodged. Why do I need to go there? He shouted discontentedly. That's an order, Kakashi answered. You must catch up with Sasuke and stop Gaara. Chapter 30 Shikaku. 3 shinobi and a dog were jumping over the tree branches. Pakken was in front of the procession, followed by Naruto and Sakura. Shikamaru covered the rear. Suddenly, the dog stopped, sniffing and growling quietly. What's wrong? Sakura asked. They're following us, the dog answered. Then, I'll deal with them myself, Nara suggested, yawning widely. Are you sure? Uzumaki frowned. No, the boy shook his head. I don't have much chakra, but I think the traps will work, Shikamaru suggested. Okay. Good luck to you. Leaving Nara, the girls and the dog rushed forward, looking for Sasuke. Moving along the branches for some time, Haruno began to lag behind. Suddenly, Naruto jumped back. In the place where she was standing a second ago, there was a kunai. Looking ahead, she frowned. There's a fight, she said. Walking a little further, they saw Shino and Kankuro. Both were fighting. One was using beetles, and the other was using puppets. Passing the scene of their battle, the shinobi continued on their way. But after a few minutes, they saw the defeated Temari, lying exhausted on the sand. Where are they? Uzumaki asked. There. Sabuko pointed ahead. You know you're weird. Why? The girl was surprised. Trying to save a monster. Temari began. He's not a monster, Naruto answered sharply. He's a person just like you. It's not his fault that the one tail was sealed in him. With these words, Naruto turned around and, ignoring the girl, rushed after Sasuke and Gaara. Pakken sniffed again and began to show the way. Soon, all three reached the Uchiha and Sabaka no. Gaara was standing on a thick branch. Or rather, something that looked like Gaara. Gaara's right hand had turned into Shikaku's paw. And the right side of his face was in the form of the one-tailed one's muzzle. Saliva was flowing from his mouth, and his eyes were looking at the shinobi with a mad gleam and hatred. The bottle in which Sabaka no kept his sand was almost destroyed. His clothes were torn, and his hair was dirty. Sakura barely held back a scream of horror when she saw the red-haired one. But then she was distracted by Sasuke, who was in a state of shock. His hair was disheveled, his t-shirt was torn, his body was covered in abrasions and bruises, his lip was split, and strange black curls were spreading across his neck. Haruno jumped up to her teammate, intending to help him, but Gaara pinned her to the tree trunk with his outstretched paw, preventing her from getting out. Uzumaki frowned. Something must be done. Sway Tun. Rupture Wave. Naruto folded 5 seals, and a stream of water burst out of her mouth, cutting the sand paw holding Sakura. Gaara growls like a real beast. The sand regains its shape. Suddenly, Gaara grabbed his head, settling on a branch. Uzumaki looked at the boy, a little confused. He straightened up abruptly, smiling even more bloodthirsty than before. Sabaka no's eyes burned with madness. Forced sleep. He folded the sheep, seal, and closed his eyes. In an instant, the sand enveloped his entire body, beginning to increase in size. When the sand tornado became the size of a mountain with the Hokage's faces, the sand disappeared. Now the one-tailed one towered before Naruto. Swallowing, the girl began to think of a plan of action. It was necessary to suppress the chakra biju. But how? Touching her shorts pocket, the girl smiled. The answer to the question came quickly. Summoning technique. She folded the seals and put her hand to the branch she was standing on. Intricate symbols began to spread along it. There was a pop, and Gamabunta appeared in a puff of smoke. Having looked around, the toad chuckled discontentedly. Why did you summon him? Help me, the girl asked, pointing towards Shikaku, who was destroying the forest. Can you immobilize him for a few seconds? No. I'm too slippery. Gamabunta shook his head, from which Uzumaki almost fell from there. Let him turn into me, the girl heard a voice in her head. Kurama, you are a genius! She thought enthusiastically and said out loud, Henge. The toad turned into a huge red fox with 9 tails. Gamabunta looked at himself and grinned. Jumping high, he pounced on Tanuki, digging his claws into his body. Naruto ran up and jumped onto Shikaku's head. Clap! And Gamabunta again became a toad, jumping to the side. Finding Gaara with her eyes sticking out of the top of the biju, Naruto jumped up and took out of her pocket a pendant in the form of a blue crystal that Hashirama had given her. Putting it on Sabakuno's neck, the girl folded seals. Hokage's special technique, submission. Hidden asterisk palm, complete submission. Naruto extended her right hand forward, on which kanji formed. Putting her palm to the pendant on Gaara's neck, the girl concentrated and jumped to the side. From Sabaku's chest, blue chakra stretched out, which Uzumaki pulled out. Landing on the ground, the girl, ignoring the pain in her legs, she put her other palm to the ground. 11 columns with metal spikes on them appeared around the one-tailed one. Pulling her hand with chakra up, the girl concentrated. The sand began to slowly crumble, and the chakra bijou returned to the boy. A few minutes later, Gaara was lying on the ground, unable to move. His whole body ached terribly. Naruto was sitting next to him, breathing heavily. She was doing this technique for the first time, so it was no surprise that she was terribly tired and had no chakra left. Having caught her breath, Naruto walked up to Gaara and sat down next to him. The dog did not expect her to kill him now, but this did not happen. The girl only took off her pendant from him and hung it around her neck. Why? The red-haired man asked in surprise. What, why? Uzumaki did not understand. Why don't you kill me? After all, I am a demon. I am a monster. So what if you are a demon? The girl began menacingly. You know, I am not an angel either. The tailed beast is sealed inside me too. But that is no reason to go crazy and kill everyone. It is better to find yourself friends. I tried, Sobakuno answered quietly. But nothing worked. Then you tried badly. Do you want me to be your friend? The girl smiled. You? The boy asked in shock. Well, yes, she shrugged. You know, I don't understand you at all. You have a family, a brother and sister, and you're so evil. But they're afraid of me. I'm sure they love you. It's just that you didn't want to make contact with them, Naruto said confidently. The girl stood up and helped Gaara sit up. The boy leaned his back against the tree trunk and looked at Naruto in surprise. Could she really be his first friend? This made his soul feel somehow warm and happy. Chapter 31. Meanwhile in Konoha, the third Hokage jumped up from his seat, looking in bewilderment at the arena where Gaara was beginning to transform into a strange creature, and at the stands where the spectators were yawning and falling asleep. Turning his gaze to the Kazekage, Hiruzen saw that all the ANBU guarding the Kage were lying on the floor in a pool of their own blood. Towering over them was Orochimaru? The rag flew off the man's face, and now in front of the Sandaime was the Hokage was standing there, his former student. Long time no see, Sarutobi-sensei, the snake grinned nastily. Orochimaru, the Sandaime whispered incredulously. But he pulled himself together and prepared for a possible fight. What does this mean? What are you talking about? Orochimaru licked his lips, tilting his head to the side. About the attack, Hiruzen answered sharply. Oh. So I just wanted to capture Konoha, the snake shrugged mockingly. It's boring to sit and sound. Reports and reports. I've completely dried up there, he sighed sadly. But then I remembered my sensei and thought that he was just as bored sitting behind papers. So, as a devoted student, I decided to help you stretch your legs, Sarutobi-sensei. I hope you haven't gotten weak from doing all that paperwork. Don't even hope, the third's eyes flashed. Orochimaru and his teacher moved to the roof of their lodge, where there was a garden. Suddenly, their future battlefield was surrounded by a purple barrier. To Hiruzen's surprised look, the snake only explained, so that they don't interfere with us. A snake appeared from Orochimaru's mouth, which rushed towards the third, preparing to bite him in the neck. However, the old man managed to intercept it, squeezing it, from which the reptile returned to Orochimaru. Frowning, Hiruzen began to think about what to do next. There was only one way out to fight. Throwing off his cloak and Hokage hat, under which was his uniform tight black tights with armor on the shoulders, a hat with armor on the sides and long black ribbons, he ran towards his former student, simultaneously taking shurikens out of his pouch and throwing them. Shadow Shuriken Technique. Now 100 copies of one weapon flew at the Sannin. However, he began to quickly fold the seals, concentrating chakra under his feet. Edo Tensei. The snake bared his teeth. He had learned this technique recently, but had already tried it. And now he considered it his duty to show this technique to his former teacher. Hiruzen watched in shock as a coffin slowly emerged from the ground, into which shuriken had crashed. A second one emerged from the ground after it. I hope you will be happy to meet your deceased teachers and successor. The Sannin licked his lips. What? This is the Hokage? Hiruzen was surprised. It can't be. That's exactly the reaction I expected from you. The third coffin began to appear. The Sannin immediately pulled himself together and frowned. He must not allow Orochimaru to summon the fourth. Not him. The old man folded the seals and placed his palm on the ground, on which the hieroglyphs passed. Summoning technique. A white and brown monkey appeared in a cloud of smoke, Enma. Quickly explaining the situation to his old friend, Hiruzen transformed him into a staff with a metal tip, which immediately extended, attacking the place where Orochimaru had stood a second ago. The snake jumped to the side, separating his hands. The technique was interrupted, and the third coffin was sucked into the ground. The Sannin cursed quietly, but then decided that 2 Hokage would be enough for him. After all, the first 2 rulers of Konoha were not weaklings. The roofs opened and fell to the ground. Tobirama, standing in the coffin, opened his eyes and looked around. What the hell? He asked. My technique? I never thought they would use it on me. Oh. Hiruzen! You've gotten old. Sarutobi stared in surprise at the resurrected teacher. Turning his gaze to the neighboring coffin, he was surprised. It was empty. Where Hashirama should have been. Senju, it was empty. What? The Sannin voiced his thoughts, staring blankly at the empty coffin. Where is your brother? He asked, looking at Tobirama. How would I know? He died before me. The albino decided to keep quiet about the fact that his brother was sent to raise Uzumaki Naruto. In any case, the 9-dame is enough for me to defeat you, Sarutobi-sensei, the snake grinned, folding the seals. Tobirama immediately froze and abruptly pounced on the student, trying to kick him with a roundhouse kick. The third intercepted the second's leg with his right hand and hit him in the chin with the fist of his other hand. The albino flew back several meters, turning in the air and landing on his feet. Hiruzen immediately extended his staff, the end of which landed in the place where the second Hokage had stood a second ago. Sway Tun. Water Dragon. A huge dragon of water appeared from a small pond in the garden for watering plants, attacking Sarutobi. He dodged at the last second, saving himself from this terrifying stream of water. Doton. Landslide. The ground beneath the second and Orochimaru's feet began to move, causing the shinobi to stagger and rush to jump onto the tree branches, but they began to fall. Senju pulled his blade out of its sheath, attacking his student. Hiruzen blocked the blow with his staff, attacking at the same time. They crossed weapons for some time, until Tobirama, having carried out a feint, hit Sarutobi with the hilt of his blade and wanted to rip his side with the blade, but a kunai thrown by someone did not give him such an opportunity. Turning his gaze to the barrier, Orochimaru saw that it had evaporated for only a second, after which it returned again. However, this second was enough for some unknown shinobi to sneak into the garden and prevent the second from killing the third. "I didn't expect to see you here, Tobirama," said a male voice. Looking back at the Hokage, Orochimaru looked in shock at Hashirama, who was holding his brother's blade with one hand, scolding him along the way. Sarutobi, not understanding anything, froze. However, having recovered from the shock, he decided that the elder Senju had been summoned by the Sannin, so he attacked him. "Is that what you taught your student, huh?" the god of the shinobi world asked, looking accusatory at his brother, simultaneously repelling the Sandame's attacks. "He throws himself at his protector with the desire to kill him. Where did you come from?" Orochimaru wheezed, coming to his senses. "I summoned you, but you didn't come. And now you've shown up and are defending the enemy. You're swearing as if we were married and I cheated on you." Hashirama snorted. "You didn't come to the summons of Edo Tensei," the snake exclaimed. "Because I've been in the world of the living for about 7 years," Senju replied. "Because of that idiot, by the way." He pointed his finger at Tobirama. "Look at yourself." The albino muttered, offended. 7 years? But how? Hiruzen was surprised. "It's a long story. In short, I took the blame for the creation of Edo Tensei on himself, and I was sent to the world of the living, where I pretended to be Anbu and began to observe Naruto." Orochimaru, having heard this, folded the tiger seal. Tobirama froze again for a second, and then pounced on Hashirama and Hiruzen. Having blocked the second's blow, Hiruzen grabbed him by the ankles and spun him around, throwing him towards Orochimaru. However, the younger Senju immediately turned around in the air and landed on his feet. Suddenly, his left side caught fire and exploded. Cursing, Tobirama began to restore it. "What the?" Sandane croaked, looking at his former teacher in surprise. "This is such a feature of the Edo technique." "Tensei," Hashirama sighed. "It's impossible to kill my brother. Any wound will heal quickly. Any torn-off body part will return to its place, even if it is destroyed. His chakra is easily and quickly restored. Although he is weaker than me, he will definitely win this fight, especially since this snake controls his mind. We must either force this guy," he pointed at the Sannin, "to cancel the technique, or seal my brother with some powerful seal similar to the one that sealed the fox in Naruto. Other exit no." "Then I have an idea," Sarutobi said slowly. "But it takes time. I'm not very good at this technique, so I have to concentrate." "Good. I've bought myself some time," Hashirama nodded. "Mokutan." Tangled trees. Several wooden beams burst from the ground, which wrapped around Tobirama's body like snakes. With a snarl, the second tried to break free, but it was useless. The tree held him too tightly, sucking out his chakra. Seeing that the Nine-Dame was immobilized, Orochimaru took out Kusanagi in the most disgusting way. He pulled it out of his mouth. Ignoring the drool, he took the weapon by the hilt and attacked Hashirama. But before the mastery of Kenjutsu, the elder Senju was as far away as the moon on foot. The first deftly blocked his blows, simultaneously conducting feints and attacks. Having cut the enemy with the sword that he managed to get from the scroll, Hashirama jumped back, watching as the upper part of the body began to fly to the side. However, snakes burst out from the cut, which rushed towards each other, intertwining and returning the Sannin to his full state. Hashirama watched in surprise as the enemy remained alive after a fatal wound, and now stood before him, grinning nastily. "I'm ready," announced the third. "Hashirama Dano, could you step aside?" "Good," the first jumped back. Shadow cloning. 2 exact copies of Sarutobi appeared next to him. Jumping up to Tobirama, one clone placed his palms on his shoulders, pouring some of his chakra and manipulating it, thus disrupting the flow of chakra. Nine-Dame and not letting him move. The second clone did the same with Orochimaru. And the real Hiruzen began to fold the seals: snake, pig, sheep, rabbit, dog, rat, bird, horse, snake, and inner concentration. A semi-transparent Shinigami. Black squiggles were drawn on his hands, red beads hung from his neck, horns stuck out of his head, a short sword was in his mouth, and the Shinigami himself was dressed in a white robe. Looking around, he realized what Sarutobi wanted from him, and stuck his hand into his soul, a blue clot that hung before his eyes. The ghostly hand came out of the clone's body, passing into the body of the second and fishing out the soul from it. "Forgive me, Hiruzen." With these words, Tobirama disintegrated, turning into pieces of paper. The albino's soul passed through Sarutobi's body. "Seal," he said, breathing heavily. Despite the fact that the Shinigami was doing this to his clone, the original also felt this terrible pain. On unsteady legs, he approached his former student, removing the second clone and placing his hands on the snake's shoulders, simultaneously restraining and leaning on the Sannin. A translucent hand immediately passed through Sarutobi's stomach, grabbing the missing Nin's soul and pulling it out of his body. Frowning, Orochimaru began to resist. He understood that if the third managed to complete the technique, then they would both be finished. He had long wanted to kill Hiruzen, but his own death was not in his plans. Raising his trembling hand, he folded the seal. Kusanagi, thrown somewhere to the side during the fight with the first, obeyed its owner and, jumping out of the ground, flew straight at the third. The Monkey King, who had previously been in the form of a staff, seeing this, transformed and rushed to intercept the weapon, grabbing the blade with his palm. However, Enma was a few seconds late, and the weapon pierced the third, coming out of his stomach. Hashirama sighed sadly, standing on a branch. He wanted to help, but did not have time. At least because he knew absolutely nothing about this technique and he was curious. As a result, he missed the moment when Kusanagi flew up to Hiruzen. And when he noticed, it was too late. However, despite everything, the Sandaime continued to pull the soul out of Orochimaru. He understood that he would not completely seal it. But he was still able to deprive him of his hands. Obeying Hiruzen's mental command, the Shinigami took the Zanpakuto out of his mouth, licking his lips. Moment! And the hands of Orochimaru's soul were cut off and sealed. And on the Sannin's body, they fell down limply. The man, no matter how hard he tried, could not move them. The Sannin, mentally cursing his former teacher, took a couple of steps back. The Shinigami disappeared and the third fell to the ground. The purple barrier fell and someone who held it picked up the Sannin and disappeared. The Anbu and Shinobi rushed into the garden, looking for the third. Senju, wearing a mask and cloak, joined them. And Enma disappeared in a puff of smoke. Chapter 32: The Search. Cold rain was dripping onto the ground. 100 people in black clothes had gathered at the cemetery. Many portraits of the dead stood in front of them. The largest was the portrait of the third Hokage. Naruto, standing next to Teams 7 and 3, looked around. A little boy was crying, clinging to a man in glasses. Asuma, Hiruzen's son, silently stared at one point. Many shinobi and ordinary people looked sadly at the photographs of the dead. The very emotional Lee and Guy were silently upset, because men with the power of youth do not cry. Uzumaki raised the corners of her lips, sadly looking at the dead. Despite the fact that she did not particularly like Sarutobi, it was very sad. Hashirama, seeing the face of his pupil, lightly hugged her by the shoulders. He himself cast henge on himself, so he calmly stood next to everyone. Sakura wiped away a tear and looked at Kakashi, who, judging by his thoughtful look, was remembering something. Then it was the turn to put flowers on fresh graves. Since no one close to her had died, she placed her flower on the gravestone of the Sandaime, turning her gaze to Naruto, who was putting a red tulip on the gravestone of Aki, who had died. During the attack, she had gone to the store to do some shopping. A huge snake had fallen on the store, destroying the building and crushing the woman. Her son Fudo was at home at the time. However, since he was now an orphan, Naruto decided to take the boy in and raise him, just like Hashirama had raised her. So now 3 clones were sitting with the boy. Although he could neither talk nor walk yet, he still managed to cause a lot of trouble. However, Haim did not care one bit. After a while, everyone went home. Arriving at the mansion, the girl immediately rushed to her room to change into more comfortable clothes. And then hurried to Fudo. As one of the clones reported, the boy was sleeping, and everything was fine with him, but Uzumaki wanted to check it herself. And it was true. The baby was sweetly snoring into the pillow. Touching his red hair, the girl sighed sadly, moving away from the crib that was brought from the boy's mother's house. "Why are you sad?" a voice was heard somewhere to the right. Turning around, Uzumaki saw Jiraiya, dressed in his usual clothes. She did not see him in the crowd of people at the funeral, but the smell of alcohol made it clear that the man had been drinking. His mother died. She looked at Fudo again. "Aki?" "Yes, that's sad," sighed the Sannin, who had managed to make friends with the woman. "And you took him for yourself?" "Yes," Naruto nodded. "But I won't be able to keep an eye on him all the time. I'll have to ask Grandma Suing for a favor. By the way," Jiraiya jumped to the floor. "Since Hiruzen-sensei died," at this point the white-haired man's voice trembled. "Then we need a new Hokage." "You're definitely not suitable for this position," snorted Naruto. "And the clan heads won't allow Danzo. That's why we're going to look for Tsunade." "Tsunade? That woman whose photos you showed me? Your teammate and Hashirama's granddaughter?" Uzumaki raised an eyebrow. "She's strong, of course, but she's too deep in debt. And her drinking and gambling habits will destroy not only Konoha's treasury, but the village itself." "Yes, but if we persuade her and wean her off drinking and gambling, she'll be just fine." "You will wean her off drinking and gambling yourself," the girl grinned. "We will do this together," Jiraiya smiled broadly. "Well, no. Don't drag me into this," the girl shook her head. "Why is that?" "Her stroke is too strong. But she wants to live somehow." Uzumaki looked closely at her godfather. "Especially since she is your teammate." "So what? She's your cousin's aunt. Moreover, Tsunade is an excellent medic and can cure Lee. But if you don't want to, then I think I'll go." The Sannin turned to the window, mentally counting to 3. 1, 2, 3. "Stop!" Uzumaki exclaimed. "What did you just say? Can she cure Lee? Then quickly pack your things and let's go look for her, and along the way you can teach me some cool technique." "But," Jiraiya wanted to object. "The summoning technique is not enough," the girl snorted. "My father had a lot of cool techniques, and you, as his teacher, definitely know a couple of them. So you will teach. And this is not up for discussion," she added with steel notes in her voice. "Okay. We'll meet in an hour at the gate," and the Sannin jumped out the window. "Just sober up first," Naruto shouted after him. "Or else you stink of alcohol. Well, here you go. This is where you will go through the first stage to create the rasengan." Jiraiya and Naruto were standing on a small hill. They left Konoha yesterday afternoon, and spent the whole day on the road. They spent the night at a hotel, which, by the way, Uzumaki paid for. The white-haired man stretched out his hand, and a second later a blue translucent ball, consisting of thousands of blue threads, began to spin on it at a furious speed. Naruto, frowning, looked closely at the ball. Jiraiya grinned and put away the technique. He went to a small tree and took out 2 small balls. He threw one to the girl and took the other in his hand. The green ball with white clouds on it began to stretch out, as if several small needles were simultaneously trying to pierce it from the inside. The next moment, the ball burst, splashing Jiraiya with water. "At the first stage, you must fill this ball with your chakra, and then chaotically control it. One thread of chakra must move faster than the other, and the third faster or slower than the first 2. But you must spin the chakra either clockwise or counterclockwise depending on the type of your chakra circulation." "Which hand do you hold the pen in?" "With your right," answered Naruto. "So the chakra must spin to the right. Is everything clear?" Uzumaki nodded her head. She closed her eyes, stretching her hand forward. The girl concentrated, and the next moment the rubber ball began to stretch, like the toad Sannin S, but nothing else happened. The water inside the ball calmed down. "Well, you train here for now, and I'll go gather information," said Jiraiya, turning around. Naked girls are not information. Uzumaki shouted indignantly after him. Chapter 33 Rasengan. Naruto was angry. She had been mastering the first stage of the Rasengan for a week now. But nothing was working. Jiraiya reassured her that he himself had been training in the first stage for about a month. Meanwhile, the journey continued. The Sannin and Uzumaki visited about 10 villages that Tsunade had recently visited, and judging by everything, they were approaching the place where Senju was currently located. Jiraiya and Naruto stopped at a hot spring. The owner turned out to be an old friend of the man, so they were relaxing there practically for free. The woman had a small son and a cat named Misa. The girl was sitting at the table and eating, when suddenly something hit her legs. Looking down, she saw the ball she had been training with. The cat jumped up to the ball and started playing with it, pushing it with her paws from side to side. Suddenly, the ball exploded, dousing the cat with water. Hissing, Misa jumped to the side. Naruto's gaze, watching this picture, became thoughtful, and then she, smiling widely, took the cat in her arms, starting to stroke it. "Misa, you're just a genius!" Uzumaki exclaimed. Putting the cat on the floor, the girl rushed into her room. Running into it, Naruto rushed to the balls with water lying in the corner of the room. Taking one in her right hand, Haim began to twirl the water in different directions with the help of chakra. The rubber began to stretch in different directions and burst. Taking another ball in her hand, the girl did the same, and it burst again. An hour later, Jiraiya came, looking in surprise at the green rubber and water on the floor. "I did it!" "What second stage?" Naruto asked happily. "Great. Let's go to the market to buy more balls." "Yeah," Uzumaki nodded. Her supplies were just about to run out. They left the inn, heading towards the largest and busiest street in town. At the market, vendors were shouting loudly, attracting customers. The Sannin walked confidently towards one of the stalls. Various rubber balls were laid out on a large table. 40 balls, please," the white-haired one asked, holding out the money. "Simple balls or with water inside?" the vendor asked. "Simple," the Sannin answered. The man standing behind the counter began to put 40 balls in a large paper bag. Then he took the money and gave the change, holding out the purchase. Jiraiya took it and led Naruto back to the inn. As soon as they returned, the Sannin took the ball in his hand, which began to stretch and exploded. "The second stage is similar to the first. Give more chakra, concentrating it in one point. This way, you should explode the ball. Get started." He took the ball from the bag and threw it to the girl. She began to concentrate, spinning the air in different directions with the help of chakra. The rubber stretched and the ball turned out to be perforated, and the air slowly began to come out of it. "What?" Uzumaki asked, dumbfounded. "I told you it would be harder." The Sannin smiled. "Train, and tomorrow morning we leave." Tsunade was spotted in the neighboring city. "We must hurry to catch her there." "Okay." Uzumaki nodded. "You will train on the way," the man added, leaving the room. The blue-eyed girl sighed heavily. "You can't change the Sannin. He was a pervert and will always be a pervert." Then the girl took a new ball and continued training. However, no matter how many times she tried, each time the balls were perforated somewhere in the same place, and then slowly deflated, like balloons. Taking a deep breath, Uzumaki sat down on the floor, wiping the sweat from her forehead. If the second stage was so difficult, then how difficult would the third be? Jiraiya said that this was an A-rank technique, therefore one of the most difficult techniques. The next day they left the hotel at about noon. They could have left earlier, of course, if the Sannin hadn't gotten drunk again. As a result, the girl pushed her good-for-nothing godfather around for about 2 hours. And then, spitting on all the rules of decency, she poured a bucket of ice water on him and gave him an hour to get ready and get his body in order. And now Haim was walking along the dusty road with Jiraiya, trying to blow up the ball. Along the way, they bought about 60 balls, so now Naruto had a good supply. "I think I got it," Uzumaki exclaimed happily. Jiraiya, who was quietly watching the student, raised an eyebrow. The blonde took a new ball in her hand. She closed her eyes and sighed. Concentrating her chakra in the middle of her palm, the girl began to quickly field the ball. Suddenly, it began to vibrate and explode. Well done, Jiraiya raised the corners of his lips in a smile. Practice a little more, and then proceed to the third stage. Yeah, the girl nodded and, taking a new ball in her hand, concentrated. An hour later, when Naruto blew up about 40 balls, they stopped to rest. Sitting under a tree, the Sannin took the ball in his hands. Nothing happened, only the ball began to shake slightly in the man's hands. And? Uzumaki did not understand. You do not see what is happening inside the ball now. However, I will show you. With these words, he put the ball aside and formed a rasengan in his hand. You must use what you understood in the first and second in the third stage. You need to learn to hold a clot of chakra in your hand. That is, when you showed the third stage, you showed me the rasengan, but only in a ball. As I understand it, all these 2 stages were necessary for me to learn how to control chakra outside my body. In the third stage, I have to create a rasengan in the ball, which helps to give the technique a round shape. And then I will create this shape myself, right? Yes. You are right. Good, nodded Uzumaki. Taking the ball in her hand, she concentrated again. A second. And it exploded, dousing the girl with a gust of air. Closing her eyes, Uzumaki began to try again and again until the bag was empty. In half an hour we will come to the city and buy more balls there. In the meantime, you should rest. The girl sighed, mentally agreeing with the Sannin. Her palms were already shaking from overexertion. Chapter 34 Arguing with the Slime Princess. In Tanzaka's city at 4 o'clock. As soon as they arrived at the market, Jiraiya immediately bought balls, and Naruto began training. And then the Sannin began to take his goddaughter to gambling establishments, asking the players there about Tsunade. As it turned out later, the woman was spotted this morning near the Sun Glare Hotel. Having gone there, the shinobi learned that Senju had not yet arrived. Usually Tsunade-san and Shizen-san only come late at night, said the young girl, standing at the reception desk. I see, sighed Jiraiya. Do you know where exactly she goes? Usually to the nearest gaming centers, or to a bar on the next street, the receptionist answered thoughtfully. Can you tell me where this bar is? The Sannin winked at her, which made Naruto wince. So old, but he always sticks to the young ones. Of course. As soon as you leave the hotel, turn right and go straight. As soon as you reach a small house, you will immediately understand that this is the bar. Jiraiya and Uzumaki thanked the girl and left the hotel. Turning right, they walked forward, passing various houses and shops. And how are we going to find this bar? The Sannin puffed when they passed several monotonous houses. As soon as you reach a small house, you will immediately understand that this is the bar. The man mimicked the girl. Ugh, you! We will never find it. It will stink just like you do when you stumble into your room late at night. Naruto sighed heavily when another ball flew apart into rubber rags, scaring several passers-by. Look for the smell of fumes. Soon the right place was found, a small bar that smelled strongly of alcohol and cigarettes. Jiraiya walked past the guard, looking around the room and looking for Hashirama's granddaughter. You can't! Jiraiya heard the guard's voice. Turning around, he saw that he was not letting Uzumaki pass. Why is that? The girl narrowed her eyes. You're underage, the man answered. I came here with him. She pointed her finger at the Sannin. We're looking for a woman. And by the way, I wasn't going to drink. You don't care. Let her in. The white-haired man interrupted him. We're going to see that woman over there. He pointed to a far table. I'll personally make sure the girl doesn't drink. Well, then. Okay. The guard answered confusedly, letting Naruto pass. The girl nodded and followed her godfather into the establishment. Jiraiya led her to the farthest table, where 2 women were sitting. One of them was getting drunk, and the other was holding a pig in her hands. Uzumaki recognized the blonde as Tsunade, whose photo her godfather had shown her. Hashirama's granddaughter looked too young for her 50 years. Fair skin, brown eyes, neat fingernails, and not a single wrinkle. She looked 20 or 25 years old. Having greeted her, the Sannin and Naruto sat down at the table. The white-haired one ordered more drinks. The old friends began to talk, remembering the past. Jiraiya slowly approached the topic of Hokage, suggesting that Tsunade become the fifth. Being Hokage is too stupid. It's not for me. Neither money nor power, nothing matters compared to life. The fourth became Hokage and died young, the third. Where was he going? He took on something that was beyond his strength. Don't you dare! Naruto slammed her fist on the table, looking the woman in the eyes and switching to the informal, you. Don't you dare talk about the third like that. The old man may not have been the best person or ruler, but he loved Konoha. Just like we love it. My friends live in Konoha, people who have become my family. And I want to become stronger so that I can protect them and make our village the best. Big words for a brat like you, the woman chuckled. But will you have enough determination to fulfill your dream? Will you be able to go all the way to the end and not give up? Not die on the battlefield, like expendable material? My will is stronger than yours, Tsunade, Uzumaki grinned. The Sannin jumped up, boring the girl with her gaze. Are you challenging me? Naruto stood up after him, looking Senju in the eyes. Jiraiya groaned softly. Tsunade's assistant Shizen trembled, hugging Tuntun. What if that's the case? She raised her right eyebrow. She spent 6 months learning this trick. Or are you afraid of losing to a child? Good, Tsunade suddenly calmed down. Sitting down, she looked defiantly at Uzumaki. I propose a bet. I'll bet my necklace, and you bet the position of Hokage. In a week you must learn the rasengan. If you win, I'll go with you and become Hokage, and I'll even give you the necklace. If not, then you'll have to return home with nothing. She leaned forward, resting her hands on the table. Mistress! Shizen exclaimed. But this necklace. You value it so much. You can keep this necklace for yourself, Naruto sighed. I have my own. My good friend and teacher gave it to me, she explained, looking at the surprised face of the woman. And this friend would like you to become the fifth. Don't upset Grandpa. With these words she turned around, leaving the bar. What is she talking about? Tsunade asked in shock. In the evening, an unexpected guest came to Naruto's room. The girl had just returned from training and was now resting, when suddenly there was a knock on the door. Shizen? She was surprised. Come in, sit down. Naruto, please, give up this argument. Dan's niece began, standing on the threshold. This necklace is a dear memory for the lady. The only thing she has left from the people she loved. I'm telling you that I don't need it, Uzumaki shrugged. But if this necklace is so dear to Tsunade, why did she put it on the line? The woman only sighed heavily, lowering her head. Lady Tsunade was not always like this. She has changed very much. This necklace was a gift, first to my brother, then to my uncle. They both died. And the jewelry is all that the lady has left as a keepsake. Therefore, please, do not take it away from her. Naruto clenched her fists and looked at her interlocutor gloomily. I never give in or retreat, I always go all the way. And I never go back on my words. I didn't start this argument because of the necklace, but because she was wrong. After my victory, I will give her necklace, which I will receive as a prize. You have nothing to worry about. But Kato wanted to object. It's all good. Since this thing is dear to her, it will stay with her. I will only take it for a while to check something. And then I will give it back. Okay, the dark-haired girl smiled, turning around and leaving. Chapter 35 Tsunade's Reply. Since the meeting with Tsunade and Shizen, all this time, Jiraiya was somehow strangely tense, and he didn't even drink. All of Naruto's attempts to question his godfather about his strange behavior ended in failure. The man skillfully changed the subject, not allowing Uzumaki to even ask a question. What the hell is going on with you? The girl finally couldn't take it anymore. Nothing. The man shook his head. At least you won't understand. I'm not stupid. Naruto's eyes darkened with suppressed anger. Explain everything to me. Okay. The white-haired man sighed tiredly. What worries me is that Orochimaru met Tsunade before us. Orochimaru? The same snake that attacked us during the second Chunin stage. Sure can? Haim was surprised. What does he want from Tsunade? Apparently he wants to restore his arms, which the Shinigami took from him. The Sannin shrugged. And how are you doing with the rasengan? He quickly changed the subject. I can create it without the ball, but it is very difficult to control the shape and various movements of the chakra. She sighed sadly. Then why are you here now and not at training? I can't train. My arms are already shaking from overexertion. Kurama advised me to rest a little for now. Well, then rest, and I'm going. The Sannin got up from the chair he was sitting on and left the room. Naruto sighed sadly. After the third's funeral, Hashirama told her that before his death, Hiruzen sealed Orochimaru's arms by summoning the Shinigami. And now the snake wants to get his arms back so that he can once again fold seals and use various techniques. Probably, the Sannin offered Tsunade some kind of deal. He would give her something, and in exchange she would return his hands. But the woman could not give an answer right away, so he gave her a week to think about it. But since the decision was difficult for her, she decided to make the choice easier. And if Naruto managed to learn the rasengan in a week, then Senju would refuse the snake and become the fifth. And if Uzumaki did not learn the rasengan in a week, then the woman would return Orochimaru's hands, and he would give her something, after which he would continue to study techniques and, in the end, attack Konoha again. And this necessary prevent. Tsunade walked through Tanzaku, thinking about Orochimaru's words. The week allotted to her for a decision had passed. Resurrect Dan and Nawaki. Oh! How she dreamed of this! How she wanted to meet her disobedient younger brother and such a dear lover again. But she understood that the dead cannot be brought back. Even if there is a technique capable of doing this, the dead must remain dead. So how about it? A hissing voice was heard behind the woman. I will heal you, she said firmly. But in return, you will leave the village alone. Good, the snake squeezed out. Shall we begin? Senju turned and nodded. With a slow step, she headed towards her former teammate. He, also unhurriedly, walked towards her, stretching out his bandaged hands forward. They were shaking violently. It was very difficult for the snake to move them. Stopping a meter from each other, the Sannin froze. The blonde began to form a ball of chakra in her palms. Orochimaru slowly pulled both hands towards it. And when the ball and fingers were a couple of centimeters apart, a kunai thrown by someone cut the air. Orochimaru and Tsunade reflexively jumped back, turning their gaze to the roof, on which stood an ash-haired guy in large round glasses. Having done a couple of somersaults, he landed behind the snake. What is it? Have you finally decided to betray me? The man hissed, not even looking behind him. Kabuto was silent. A sudden guess visited the dark-haired man's head. Tsunade? He asked carefully. From the look of his former teammate, he realized that he was right. The woman tried to kill him. So that's your answer, Tsunade, the snake said contemptuously. After everything I offered you, you almost killed me. It's good that I have my faithful Kabuto, who noticed the evil intent in your supposedly healing techniques in time. Right? We are both doctors, the guy answered. But I want to confirm that she was preparing chakra for battle. Ah, Tsunade! And I was hoping that love would flare up between us again, the snake said in a feigned upset voice. Senju only chuckled. And I practically gave up my dream of destroying Konoha. Orochimaru, the woman said sadly. As for your promise to leave the village, it's a lie. I knew it, she shook. I knew that I didn't have a chance. A chance to see them again. Even for a moment, a salty tear rolled down her cheek. To see them, to touch them. To feel them. Just to see their precious smiles again, a second tear rolled down the woman's cheek. Grief. I miss them so much that I would sacrifice everything for a minute, just to see them again, just for a minute. For this, I am ready to destroy entire villages, and every inhabitant, hopelessness and pain appeared in her voice. Just think! I could be so blind. But memory. It still keeps their faces. I loved them, she spread her arms. I loved them so much. How I want to hug them again. Her hands fell limply down, and the woman began to straighten up slowly. Steel appeared in her voice, and the tears stopped flowing. And now I met her. This girl. She reminded me of something. Something that I would like to forget. The images of Dan and Nawaki appeared before the woman's eyes. She reminded me of the dream they shared with me. This dream cost them their lives. It became everything to them. Tsunade looked firmly at the snake. You once said that everything in the world would disappear. I wish it were true, and this memory would disappear too. But it will not happen. It seems we have reached a dead end, Orochimaru summed up. I'm afraid I have no choice but to use force. Instead of answering, the woman narrowed her eyes and ran sharply at the Sannin. Leaping into the air, she stretched her right leg forward, and her kick landed in the place where the snake and his subordinate had stood a second ago. The ground cracked under the Senju's heel, and part of the long, monotonous walls that made up the Tanzaki labyrinth collapsed. Come on, Orochimaru! The woman said belligerently. It's surprising that during all this time we never met in battle, the Sannin grinned, noting Kabuto's surprise out of the corner of his eye. True, Tsunade nodded, taking off her green jacket, and ran towards the house on the roof of which Yakushi and Orochimaru were standing. Don't even hope! First, you will fight me, the bespectacled man said smugly. I'm not afraid. I'm ready to kill you both right now. She punched the wall, which immediately collapsed. Her strength is inexhaustible, Orochimaru shook his head, jumping onto the branch of a nearby tree. Keep in mind, your fight can last too long. I can see it myself, Kabuto frowned. But I would choose a different battlefield. It's too crowded here. A change of scenery? Asked the Sannin. I want to find a more spacious place. Besides, uninvited guests may come. I met them on the way. They are already close. Tsunade, looking at the whispering shinobi, jumped into the air and wanted to kick Orochimaru with a roundhouse kick, but he dodged and jumped to the ground. With a cry of, "Take that!" the woman broke the branch they were sitting on a second ago with her other foot. Kabuto jumped up to the snake, and they ran towards the clearing, which was not far from here. Uninvited guests? The man asked. Yes. One of them is a Sannin, just like you. The dark-haired man chuckled, remembering his old friend. Jumping high into the air, the Sounders jumped over another wall. Tsunade didn't bother, and simply broke through it, heading off in pursuit of these two. Chapter 36 Meeting Old Acquaintances. Uzumaki, Shizen and Jiraiya landed at the location where they felt the chakra surge. Tsunade. However, they did not find the woman. Instead, there was a whole pile of broken walls. What the? Naruto said in shock. So, the Sannin drawled, looking around. I see someone ruined our Tsunade's mood. She's just angry. I see. But where is she now? The girl approached the destroyed building. A whole road of holes in the city walls appeared before Naruto's eyes. Taking a step forward, Haim felt that she had stepped on something soft. Looking down, she saw a green Senju jacket with a red circle on the back. Lady Tsunade's jacket! Shizen exclaimed, looking at the clothes lying around. The little pig approached the jacket and sniffed it. Tun-tun, a trace! The pig grunted in agreement and ran straight along the road of rubble made by Senju. The three shinobi hurried after Tun-tun. The pig clearly had a good sense of smell. Probably even better than any dog. In any case, she led them to a large field where Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Kabuto were. Naruto narrowed her eyes. She remembered this gray-haired bespectacled man from the exam. Then he seemed very, very suspicious to her. As it turned out, for good reason. Now Yakushi was wearing the protector of the Sound Village. He was probably spying on Konoha. They say you can't stand the sight of blood. Let's check if it's true. The ash-haired man said loudly, raising his kunai to hit Tsunade, who was sitting not far from him. Uzumaki took 2 smoke bombs from her pouch and threw them at the guy. He, surprised, stepped back, looking at the barrier in the form of smoke, which began to slowly dissipate. And Jiraiya, Naruto, Shizen and Tun appeared before Yakushi's eyes. The Toad Hermit threw his former teammate's jacket over her. Tsunade's student hurried to her mentor, lowering the pig to the ground. And Uzumaki carefully examined her old acquaintances, preparing to attack them at any moment. "I haven't seen my old friend for a long time," Orochimaru muttered, grinning. "How many years have passed since our last meeting, buddy?" Jiraiya said. "And yet I did the right thing that I didn't trust you, Kabuto," said the blue-eyed girl, burning a hole in Yakushi with her gaze. "Do you know this guy?" Jiraiya was surprised. "Yeah. We took the Chunin exam together. He tried to suck up to our guys with mean info cards," the girl answered, when suddenly she felt someone pushing her, and Haim fell to the ground along with her godfather. "Get out of the way! This is my fight!" With this cry, Tsunade attacked the guy. The woman raised her leg and cut the air with it over Kabuto, who was crouched on the ground. Turning in the air, she knocked the ash-haired kunai out of his hands with a kick from her other leg, and then ran at him. They clashed in taijutsu. Senju wanted to punch the guy in the face, but he dodged in time, trying to push the woman away with his foot. However, she intercepted it and pulled her towards herself. By inertia, Kabuto also approached Tsunade, and she punched him in the nose. A loud crunch was heard. Hastily twisting his leg out of the sand and steel grip, the guy hurried to jump back, quickly healing himself. The woman grinned and raised her fist to strike, starting to push the enemy towards the stone. The poor guy didn't know what to do. The Slug Princess's blows were fast and strong, and Yakushi only had time to dodge. He didn't have enough time to counterattack. Touching his back to the cold stone, Kabuto looked around, looking for a way out of the situation. And then a victorious grin appeared on his face. Snatching a kunai that was sticking out of the stone, the guy, not sparing himself, pierced his hand. Blood gushed onto Tsunade, preparing for the final blow. The woman's pupils dilated, and she herself began to shake. "I never thought that I would fight 2 legendary Sannin," the guy said, putting away the kunai. "But it looks like one is no longer a fighter." And the guy punched the blonde, throwing her back several dozen meters. Shizen deftly caught her teacher, worriedly beginning to examine her. Kabuto jumped back to Orochimaru, who was grinning unkindly. Taking a pill from his pouch that restored blood and strength, the guy put it in his mouth and began to chew it. Swallowing, he looked at his mentor and said something. The snake nodded in agreement, and brought his bandaged hand to his mouth. Having bitten into the bandage with his teeth, the Sannin untied it. White stripes fell to the ground, revealing the man's purple hand. "Shizen," Jiraiya called, continuing to look at his opponents, "take care of Tsunade." "Yes," the woman answered. "Naruto," the girl looked at her godfather's back, "deal with Kabuto." "With pleasure." Uzumaki hit the fist of her right hand into the palm of her left. The Toad Hermit bit his thumb and began to fold the seals. Meanwhile, Yakushi took some blood from his wounded hand and, rolling up the sleeve of Orochimaru's jacket, thereby exposing the summoning seal, ran 2 fingers over it, leaving a bloody trace. After that, the bespectacled man began to fold the seals. "Summoning technique," the opponents said at the same time, putting their palms to the ground. There was a loud bang, and a small toad and 2 snakes appeared in clouds of smoke. Jiraiya looked at Gamakichi in surprise, and Orochimaru grinned. "What is this?" Naruto raised one eyebrow, looking at the smiling toad. "What's wrong with you, Arrow Sannin? We need Gamabun to hear." "Well," the Sannin smiled awkwardly, rubbing the back of his head. "Tsunade gave me something to drink, and now I'm practically unfit for battle," and he laughed. "Idiot," the girl muttered, sighing in irritation. "Couldn't you have told me earlier? I didn't want to bother you, and did you want to make yourself look like an idiot?" Uzumaki looked skeptically at the Sannin, mentally asking Kami why this pervert turned out to be her godfather. And why did she even get involved with him? Why did she get this For everything good and bad, Kurama answered sarcastically in the girl's subconscious. Orochimaru, who was apparently tired of watching this circus, ordered the snake to attack. The reptile suddenly pounced on its opponents, smashing its head into the place where they had been standing a second ago. The ground flew in different directions. Clouds of dust rose. Kabuto, jumping off the head of one of the snakes, rushed to Shizen, who was holding Tsunade, and hit her. The women flew to the side, hitting the ground painfully. Uzumaki, seeing this, rushed at Yakushi, but one of the snakes, appearing literally out of nowhere, closed its mouth over her, swallowing the girl. The blue-eyed girl, finding herself in the darkness and feeling the terrible stench, cursed. Mokutan. Technique of piercing with thorns. She said the name of the technique. In an instant, the chakra Uzumaki walked all over the snake's body. And a second later, huge wooden spikes pierced the reptile through and through. With a characteristic pop, the animal disappeared, and the girl climbed out to freedom. Doton. Swampy swamp. Naruto heard her godfather's voice. The second snake, on which Orochimaru was, began to sink into the softened and moistened ground. The reptile twitched, but could not move. Although the swamp was shallow, it immobilized. Having decided that Jiraiya did not need help, the girl hurried to Shizen and Kabuto. The woman was already throwing poisonous needles, which the bespectacled man successfully dodged. Gathering chakra around his hand, he used one of his medical techniques. Having hit Kato in the solar plexus, Kabuto threw her aside. However, she did not lose her head and immediately exhaled purple smoke from her mouth, which filled a small area of the clearing. Uzumaki held her breath, knowing what awaited her if she inhaled this smoke. However, the technique quickly dissipated. Yakushi disappeared underground and attacked the woman from behind. Touching her ankles with his hands, he deprived Shizen of the ability to control her legs. Her knees buckled, and Dan's knees fell to the ground. Suddenly, the snake that was in the swamp moved, and with its huge body, Naruto was thrown aside. The girl hit her back painfully on a stone. She screamed and fell to the ground, coughing up blood that had collected in her mouth. Kabuto turned and headed towards Tsunade, intending to kill her. The woman had not yet moved away, and so was now helpless as a kitten. Shizen, seeing this, rushed to intercept Yakushi, but he incapacitated the dark-haired woman with a light blow to the solar plexus. Kato flew to the side, and a trickle of blood flowed down her chin. Meanwhile, Orochimaru, using the Jiraiya technique, lured him into a trap, depriving him of the ability to move. Bad grin distorted pale-faced Sanina.